Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, we're back.
We are back. I'm excited.
We're back.
Been a bit of a whirlwind.
It has. It has been a little bit of a whirlwind. I just want to say something off the bat that it's been a while, and I didn't like being away from you, and I don't want to let that happen again because you're too important to me. So I'm really sorry, guys, that it happened. That we were apart for so long, you know? Like, I just missed them. You know what I mean? I just miss these guys.
They're like your third and fourth children. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're listening on the podcast, I was talking to my swords. I tried to take my swords to Ohio Stadium. It was the first test run. Landis on Sunday, not for a game, but for a celebration. Didn't get him in. Ran into a very friendly police officer outside, and I think I learned some lessons here, Bill. And people have pointed this out to me. If you're a guy in a quarter zip carrying swords in cardboard, you're a threat to society.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a guy in a cape and a crown walking around with your swords sheathed properly, you're just a king. So I almost didn't want to go too far with the swords. And the result was that I looked like a lunatic that the cops had to be worried about. So next time, if I try it, I've got to go all the way. Right.
Can I break a bit of news to you? When you're walking around in a cape and a crown, you also look like a lunatic. Wow. It's just a different kind of lunatic. But it's the same, different flavors of the same guy.
Oh, okay. I'll get him in someday. I'll either get him in or go to jail. But I put my swords. Actually, a part of it was I put my swords down at the Ohio State celebration outside. I put my bag down and my swords down, and I told a security guard, "That's my bag over there. I don't want you to think like it's a package. It's going to be a problem or whatever. I'm going to go film players walking in and that kind of thing." And then I came back, and there were two other security people who were pointing at my bag and the swords and being like, "What is this?" So it's probably on me. Does it feel like this is a me problem?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
They're just protecting us. So we have a lot to talk about on this show. We're going to get into the Jim Knowles move from Ohio State to Penn State. We're going to get into what Notre Dame is going to do after losing defensive coordinator Al Golden to Notre Dame. But we're also going to get into, we want to get back, Landis, to making sure we take care of all 28 of our Northern fan bases and talk about all the coordinator moves that have happened so far in the North. 28 teams that we cover, 56 coordinator spots then, because there's a trend here that I'll be very curious to get your opinion on. And I feel like we've had a fair share of movement, but and I also want to talk to you about how much coordinators matter. Do you think, right? How much do coordinators matter? We can have a healthy conversation about that, right?
We can, because I think you and I may disagree a little bit on that too. So
yeah. Also, people are asking about my dog, my three-legged dog. The dog is doing much better. She's hopping around. I had not seen her until Saturday night without her leg. So it's just crazy because they shaved her, and then, there's a giant incision where her leg used to be. So it's a process. My wife is handling the process, but she's doing much better. So everybody who asked. So the people who also didn't know, we didn't do shows last week after we left Atlanta. The last show we did was Tuesday morning in Atlanta. And just so people know, we weren't abandoning you guys. We flew straight. It's I haven't talked in 4 days. I can't talk. We flew straight from Atlanta to company meetings where all we talked about, Landis, was how to make KOTN better. And then you and I got back to our homes on Saturday night and went to the Ohio State celebration on Sunday. So we weren't just napping.
We weren't napping, no. Although I was a little under the weather for part of that trip, so I actually did nap. If it's the trust tree, can I be honest? I did nap a little bit because I wasn't feeling well. Yeah, you got sick in addition to flying and being at our company meeting. So anyway, we're super excited to be back. We're feeling good. The North won. The North won. Everybody knows that now, man. Right? Yeah. I'm a little surprised I didn't let you in with your swords. Did you remind them that the North won? Maybe that was your misstep.
I did. I mean, like next year they'll be letting me in. Next year, like we're still, and also I just want to make it clear to anybody, we are officially ready to go on a media tour of any show in the country who wants to have us explain why we were right all along. Would you be in that, Landis, if anybody calls?
Would I be in favor of going around places and saying how right we were? Sure. Yeah.
That's victory juice right there.
But I also reserve the right to do no shows if we're ever wrong.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, that's how everybody does it. Also, we're going to get Feinbaum on this offseason. That's number one on the list. Tony Petitti and Paul Feinbaum. We're going to get them on. We had a huge move, Landis. This is a huge thing. My God, it's good to be back. We're back. Thanks for being here with us. Jim Knowles left Ohio State for Penn State. Report today from Brett McMurphy that Ohio State asked him not to come to the Sunday celebration while these things were happening. This is going to be one of those things where we don't know exactly what happened. I just we'll talk about like how things like this happen, but it did hover. Did it hover over or just hover around the celebration on Sunday when about 30,000 people showed up at Ohio Stadium to celebrate with the coaches and players this national championship? Everybody was kind of like, is Jim Knowles going to be here? We don't see him. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know that it hovered over. I think around is probably the more appropriate descriptor. When Ohio State was walking into Ohio Stadium, the person everyone was looking for was Jim Knowles. So there was that. And then it was quickly apparent that he wasn't there. So it's like, okay, I think we kind of know what that means. And then honestly, like I'm speaking for myself, I don't know that I thought about it a whole lot more until Ryan Day took the podium to kind of, share some remarks and run through the season. And in doing so, went through the entire coaching staff. And I thought was, rather short in his remarks about Jim Knowles. And I thought the reception by the Ohio State players was rather muted when they got to Jim Knowles. So then it kind of came back up then. But then, yeah, I don't know that it took away from the festivities necessarily, but it was certainly partially front of mind, I guess, as things were happening, because it was a rather conspicuous absence.
The bottom line is he left, and he left for another very good Northern team, a team that Ohio State is going to play next year. But there are going to be I think, at least some temporary discussion about the ins and outs of how he left and why he left. There was a report as this was happening in the Columbus Dispatch and then maybe elsewhere that Ohio State was making him an offer that their offer to him would make him the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. I don't know who the source was on that. My guess on those kinds of things is the school trying to get out the information to its fans that like, hey, we're not like trying to cheap out here. And I believe the line was $2.75 million this year for Wink Martindale at Michigan. So that's not necessarily a $3 million offer per year for Jim Knowles, but they're at least that story indicated that Ohio State was willing to give him a raise and pay. My guess is that's Ohio State trying to make its case to the fans. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Ohio State wanting to make sure people knew that it wasn't just kind of letting Jim Knowles walk out the door without a strong effort to keep him. Yeah.
Yeah. And now Brett McMurphy is and listen, Brett McMurphy has sources for sure as a national reporter. Here's what he tweeted this morning. Ohio State's Jim Knowles was asked by the school not to attend the Buckeyes national title celebration while he deliberated his options, a source said. And again, whatever this is, especially if it's a single source, it's got to be his agent, right? I mean, that's who else could it be? Just so people understand unless it's Jim Knowles himself. It's one of two people. Or
a family member.
Or a family member. Okay. So, but again, like if you're going to report this, you've got to have a person who really has a direct line to the situation. Knowles' representation tried to reach a deal with Ohio State the week before the title game and immediately after, but the eventual offer was well below the competition, the source said. Knowles signed a 3-year, $9.3 million deal with Penn State Sunday. So the thing about this is both things can be true. Ohio State can say, we offered him a deal that would make him the highest paid coordinator in college football. But if that deal was, for instance, $2.8 million a year, that would be higher than what is out there right now. But that can also be $300,000 a year below what Penn State was offering. And then there were reports that Oklahoma was in there. Maybe Notre Dame was interested there. So everybody can be telling their version of the truth here, right?
that's what often happens in these scenarios. Everyone tries to do their best to save face, I think, when something like this happens. And it doesn't mean the information is inaccurate or incorrect. It might be goosed a little bit, maybe. People want to tell their version of history. And you can also argue the semantics of like what is quote unquote well below in a world where we're talking about $3 million contracts. It's like $300,000. It wasn't like at least from my knowledge, it was like Ohio State lowballed him and offered him like 2.5, right, which is about what he was making already anyway. So it's a matter of degrees, I suppose, and everyone's going to tell their version to make themselves look a little better.
Okay, so the bottom line is he left. Does there have to be a bad guy in him leaving? Is Ohio State the bad guy here for letting him leave? Is he the bad guy for choosing to leave? Or can this just be the business of college football?
I think it can mostly be the business of college football. The problem is that he went to a conference rival, right? If Jim Knowles had gone to Oklahoma or even Notre Dame or practically anywhere else other than a team in the Big Ten that Ohio State routinely competes with to try to win that conference, this is a story, but it doesn't have the same tenor. So I don't know that there has to be a bad guy. But if there is, I don't know. I can kind of see Jim Knowles and Ohio State wearing that hat. Ohio State for I guess the perception of not doing what they needed to do to keep him, and then Jim Knowles for not only spurning Ohio State but doing so to go to Penn State. So like, can you cut that hat in half and they can each wear it?
Yeah. I'm trying again. Does this make me look like a bad guy, or is the question here who's really the Amish guy in this scenario?
It makes you look like Blossom.
That cut so deep. Oh my God. I was like, am I Heisenberg or am I an Amish guy? And you were like, you're a teenage girl from the 80s. And I think, again, just like all things can be true at the same time, it's just how you tilt. Mm-hmm. Now I'm a gang. Now, nope, still Blossom. Nope. Still Blossom. I can't escape the Blossom. Wow, that's another alternate title for the show. Philly Billy and Blossom. Now I can't stop looking at myself in my camera to think about, oh my God. So it does matter to you. So here's the thing. What brings people back? Failure and money. Failure and money is the magic elixir to keep people in their current state. But once you win, and I know our friend John has been talking about this, Michigan fan, whether people somehow held it against Michigan or criticized Michigan when Michigan won the national title last year and like everybody left, including their head coach, including their defensive coordinator, including a bunch of their other assistants, but they did it. I certainly didn't view that as like, oh man, like everybody bailing. And of course now, Jim Harbaugh did have the NCAA stuff and he was going to have a show cause and that's factored in there. But like the idea that your coaches leave after you win, because the name of the game, Landis, is not, they don't hang banners for retaining assistants. That's not why we do this. It's like, guys, let's get out there and bring these assistant coaches back. Woo! We did it. We retained the stat. It's not a victory in and of itself. It's in pursuit of a goal that they achieved. So whatever it is, and by the way, Penn State in its release, and here's the thing we're not going to do. We're not going to be like, Jim Knowles, he wasn't that good anyway. Big deal, Penn State. That's not what we're doing. Right? Are you going to do that? Are you ready to do that?
I'm not. No, I think Jim Knowles is the best defensive coordinator in college football. I'm not going to do that.
We cannot play. I mean, and I understand if like everybody just copes and like people like say, oh, cope harder. I might have said cope harder to the SEC this year. Coping is good. So like you get left by somebody, but it's not the goal. It's in service of something that happened. They did it. And Penn State did note in their press release on Jim Knowles they put out Monday morning, Pennsylvania guy. So they're selling the coming home thing. Mm-hmm. He's from Philly. Mm-hmm. Let's also be honest too. You might have to recuse yourself from the show because you are Jim Knowles. You are Jim Knowles now. You're from Philly and you went to Penn State. Jim Knowles is from Philly and now coaches at Penn State. Also, by the way, you should go get in his office and we can do a 45-minute special here on KOTN. Is going to State College coming home for somebody from Philadelphia?
I guess technically, I said this over the weekend, like, it is far more convenient to fly the hour from Philadelphia to Columbus than it is to drive the 3.5 hours into the mountains from Philadelphia to State College. So, like, I just want to make sure that's out there. I don't want people to assume a level of convenience with this move for Jim Knowles. I'm sure he's very happy to be back in the state where he was born and raised, and yes, technically geographically closer to the city of Philadelphia. But Philadelphia and State College are not the same. As someone who lived an extended period of time in both places. So it's nice to be able to sell that. I suppose I know, like, James Franklin obviously did when he went to Penn State, because he's also from Pennsylvania. But I don't actually think that mattered at all to this decision.
You don't think Jim Knowles walked into Ryan Day's office teary-eyed and said, "Ryan, thank you for this opportunity. I'm a national champion. And now it's time for me to go home." That wasn't it?
No.
He was like, 3 million smackers. See you, suckers.
Yeah.
So we don't have to be mad, is point one. If you want to be mad at anybody, feel free to be mad. But the Ohio State and Jim Knowles relationship, 3 years. In the end, 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, 3 years, 3 years. In the end, the Jim Knowles Ohio State relationship was a success for both parties. True or false?
Unequivocally true.
Unequivocally true. And like anything in life, there's two options when you create a relationship with a person or a job or an institution. You can either stay there forever or you can leave. There is not a third option. So I don't even know if this is a divorce. It's more like you dated for a while and then you just decided to go your separate ways, right? So like he didn't grow up in Ohio. He didn't go to Ohio State. Ohio State, all they did when they got Jim Knowles the first time around was they were like, wow, our defense was not what we wanted it to be. What should we do? Pay the most for the best guy available. And all they did was outbid people. So like that. So here we are. So everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. You're good. We're all good. Is that
everybody's happy? I think both sides benefited tremendously from the relationship. The thing that makes it a little hard to process, I think, is that when Ryan Day hired Jim Knowles, I think that there was, in some ways, an admission, I think, by Jim Knowles and a hope, I think, from Ryan Day that this was going to be pretty long term, that maybe Ryan Day had found in Jim Knowles what Dabo Swinney had for so long in Brent Venables, right? Like a decade long partnership where there was just going to be a tremendous amount of stability for Ohio State's defense, because Jim Knowles didn't appear to have any head coaching aspirations, although his name did come up, I think, every offseason for head coaching jobs while he was here. So I guess like that was probably just naive, right? That college football is just too big of a business to think that that's ever going to be a reality. Maybe it'll happen again. It's happening like in Iowa with Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz. I understand that it happens, but maybe at this level where Ohio State operates, that might be an impossibility. So if people can get over that, then maybe that helps this. But it's mostly just where he went, right? Again, if he would have went literally anywhere else other than Penn State or Michigan, I think people just say like, oh, well, we won the Natty. See you later, Jim. Thanks for the help. We'll see you down the road maybe sometime. It's like, nope, we're going to see you next year, and then a lot in the years to come because you decided to go to a team in the Big Ten. So they both got what they needed out of the relationship. Ohio State's defense was stabilized. It did win a national title. Jim Knowles elevated his status in the sport to the point where now he's the highest paid. So I don't know that anyone should be terribly upset about it, but I also understand that we are human and we have emotions, and the guy just went to a like perceived lower level rival, so there's not going to be a whole lot of love there between them.
I also would buy, I helped Ohio State get over the top. Wouldn't it be fun to go try help a different good program get over the top? You know, like there's
if you're not going to try to be a coach, if you're not going to try to be a head coach, but you want to keep challenging yourself professionally, I do think that makes sense.
People have their own internal motivations, so like it's fine. People make decisions. I don't think it's necessarily malfeasance or incompetence by Ohio State to let him walk, and I don't think it is like vindictiveness or disloyal for Jim Knowles to go to Penn State. So it is a reminder. Let's do this here quickly. Assistants don't matter. Also, by the way, just so everybody knows that, assistant coaches do not matter. It has been one of the tenets of my view of college football for many, many years now, Landis. Now, every rule has an exception. And I would say what matters to me is don't make a terrible hire. I think bad assistant coach hires hurt you much more than good assistant coach hires help you. And I think at a place like Ohio State, at the very top of the sport where resources are not an issue, nothing should keep you from making a good hire. So it's not like Jim Knowles is the first good defensive coordinator in Ohio State history. He came in at a time when Ohio State was not happy with its defense, but it's about players and a head coach who hires, recruits, sets a tone, develops a culture, and is the mastermind of everything. So it's about the very top, and it's about the workforce, and assistant coaches are middle managers. And now everybody, sometimes there are people in the media who like are friends with assistant coaches. This is the thing. Most people in the media, they don't want to say this stuff because all their sources are assistant coaches, and they don't want to make them mad and say that you're replaceable. You're eminently replaceable. It doesn't mean it's not good. You're not good at your job. It doesn't mean you're not important, but you're replaceable in a way that head coaches can be much less replaceable, and elite players can be much less replaceable. So in the end, and the other thing is too, the number one most irreplaceable thing in college sports is the fans that live and die with these teams. Assistant coaches, by definition, do not live and die with your teams because they are not at the top. They are they are still always trying to get somewhere. Very few assistant coaches are like, that's it. I love it here. I love you guys. I love the mascot. I love the colors. I love the fight song. I'm done. I don't even want a raise. I don't want a raise. They all want promotions and raises all the time, justifiably. But that also means they'll leave like that. So don't fall in love with your assistant coaches and don't think they can't be replaced. All right, rebuttal.
Well, I agree with don't fall in love with assistant coaches. I would also maybe say the same thing about players and head coaches. Don't fall in love with anybody. Fall in love with like the program, I guess. Yeah. But don't fall in love with any one individual, given where college football is at the moment. I guess I would just push back on maybe the idea that that poor hires matter far more than good hires. Like, I think assistant coaches can be transformative. I think they were. I think for Ohio State, the reason this is such a big story is because of how transformative Jim Knowles was at Ohio State. I think Chip Kelly did that for Ohio State this year. I think Andy Koltelnicki did that for Penn State this year, right? So I do think when moves like this happen, there is an immediate race to what are we going to do? Like we can't. Like, you can absolutely replace people. I 100% agree with that. I just think I maybe put a little more value on assistant coaches while they're at your program helping you than maybe you do. I don't know if you disagree with that or not.
No, I think you do. And it really is all about value in the end. Like, again, especially in a world where we're now paying players and we're trying to figure out like the math of all this. Like, not that there's I don't know that there is a finite amount of resources at a place like Ohio State. There may be infinite. There might be infinite. Most places have finite resources, but at the very, 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 very top of the sport, you might be able to spend the money on anything you want to spend the money on. But still, there's a little bit of a balance. And so, like, would you rather spend money to like keep Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, or would you rather spend money to keep Jim Knowles at Ohio State? I would keep it. Not that it has to be that choice, and not that it's a direct choice, but it's all much more part of the same money pool than it ever was before. So I don't know that there would be anything for Ohio State if they really, really, really were like of keeping everybody. But I'd rather keep Jeremiah Smith than Jim Knowles if that was a choice. It's a straw man argument, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, if you wanted to, power rank where you spend your money, I'm going the personnel over assistant coaches, and I might go Jeremiah Smith over most head coaches too, if you want to use that specific argument. So I absolutely agree with that, and I agree that every assistant coach, especially at a place like Ohio State with its resources, should be replaceable, and it's on Ryan Day to make the right hire. Right, that's what his job is about. I just think sometimes you kind of brush off the impact guys might have while they're there.
Yeah. I always think somebody could have done probably just as well.
Yeah.
Somebody good,
Yeah.
if you're willing to spend the money on them, somebody else could have done it too. And I think actually Chip Kelly, in a very specific way, might be more of a needle to thread at a place like Ohio State, because Ryan Day needed to have somebody that he trusted in order to give up play calling, which I think was a big part of the way they rallied the troops in the playoff run. And there's nobody he trusts more than Chip Kelly, except he also tried to hire Bill O'Brien first, and maybe that would have worked too. So anyway, I do want to get to this, and we'll come back to the Ohio State part of this before we take our first break. The Penn State part of this. What does this mean for Penn State to you? Because they're the one getting Jim Knowles. They are the one retaining a good chunk of their talent for next year. They are the one that a lot of people are saying the semifinal run if we certainly are not brushing it off at all. But if you want to be like, well, SMU and Boise State and they blew it against Notre Dame, was it really mad? I mean, like, first of all, if we're going to start living in a world where being in the Final Four of the college football playoff doesn't matter, then just don't watch the sport. Just tune in for the national championship game and think everybody else sucks. That's fine if that's how you want to absorb this sport. So that's insane to me to brush this off, but it has tremendous value for itself. What a run this was for the fans and this team and these coaches and these players. But it also, there's a lot of people thinking like it activated something in Penn State. And if it activated boosters and donors and NIL people and anybody who's like, I'm going to give, okay, and they can go get somebody like Jim Knowles, like, this is great. I think it is twofold for Penn State. A, Jim Knowles, good at his job. Two, it's a signal about how serious Penn State is about everything. What do you think it means?
I agree with you on the latter. Like, this is, if you were thinking Penn State may have been activated by pushing as far as it did this season, then I think this is a reflection of that reality, right? For Penn State to go out there and make a coordinator the highest paid at his position is a new frontier for that program. The thing that I struggle with a little bit is some of the reaction I've seen to the hires, like, oh, Penn State's really going for it. Watch out. It's like they've always had good defense. Like, they might have a better version of a good defense now, because like I said, I do think Jim Knowles is the best defensive coordinator in the sport, or like the very least, like in the handful that you would put in that conversation. James Franklin has had very good defensive coordinators. It's like the thing he's maybe done best at Penn State is consistently hire good defensive coordinators and have very good defense. So this is just, further confirmation that they're going to have that this year. I don't know if adding Jim Knowles to Penn State staff does much to change my thoughts on what I think Penn State might be on the field next year, because all of that was not about its defense. It was about James Franklin. It was about Drew Aller. It was about Andy Koltonicki. It was about its receivers. Unless you think Penn State might just go out and beat everyone like 10-0 now because Jim Knowles is there, which maybe they will. So it's a tremendous hire. I think the world of Jim Knowles as a defensive mind. I think what he did for Ohio State this year and over 3 years was remarkable. And I think what they did over the back half of the season and then the playoff, like, schematically, was quite impressive. And I think that will continue moving forward. But I don't know that I view it as a tremendous elevator for what I thought of Penn State's on-field product in 2025. That was always going to be, for me, much more about the offensive side of the ball.
But maintaining what you do best also has great value. So even if Jim Knowles is not significantly better than Manny Diaz and Tom Allen, and I have some stats here for you, if he's the same, I think there's a win in that. Because I think when Tom Allen left for Clemson, it was sort of like, what's Penn State going to do? Maybe Al Golden's a former Penn State player, the Notre Dame defensive coordinator, but he went to the Cincinnati Bengals. You maybe would have thought, I don't know, you call Al Golden home. It sounds like they were maybe going to promote Anthony Poindexter from within if they didn't get Jim Knowles, which, again, we can have a promoting from within conversation. We don't have to tie it to the Penn State part of this. But just let me run down James Franklin's defensive coordinators in his time at Penn State. His first 2 years, it was Bob Shoop, who followed him from Vanderbilt. He left to go to Tennessee, and they kind of had a weird parting. There was a lawsuit involved there. Remember, they sued each other, and it's like, well, I don't know. Get sued. I don't hope there's no law. Hey, just go get another job. We have to sue people. 2 years of Bob Shoop. 6 years of Brent Pry, who had followed James Franklin from Vanderbilt, but was promoted from within and not been the full-time defensive play caller before. 6 years he stayed, and then he left to be the Virginia Tech head coach. Then Manny Diaz, who got kind of unfairly fired as the Miami head coach. That's a great hire. 2 years, goes to Duke as the head coach. Tom Allen, out as the Indiana head coach. 1 year, goes to Clemson. By the Brian Fremeau index that we use a lot, the Brent Pry defenses were not as good statistically. It took him a little while to like max out. Brent Pry year by year from O Index, 26th best defense, 11, 19, 13, 43, ninth best defense in 2021, his last year. But then the last 3 years of Manny Diaz and Tom Allen, which I think were other two great hires, 4th and 7th for Diaz, 4th this year for Allen. So they have not been a top 5 defense, top 10 defense the entire time James Franklin has been there. They've always been pretty good. They've usually been a defense first team. But I think even to maintain the Manny Diaz, Tom Allen level, even if Jim Knowles does that, that's a success. And not that Anthony Poindexter couldn't have, but I just think for a big time program that's trying to win right now, to hire from within for a guy who's never quite really done it versus go get the best guy available. Allen and Diaz were among the best guys available when Penn State got on these other cycles. So this is, even if it's just a continuation of that, I think it's a huge win for Penn State, even though you're saying you think maybe people are catching it as more than that. And there might be a, well, how much better can you really be on defense?
Yeah, I think maybe both things can be true because I don't disagree with anything you said. I think it is a win to maintain that level of defense. You want to, I mean, every championship program wants to be able to survive coordinator departures while not suffering, from the on-field product. And James Franklin has done a very good job of that on defense and should continue to do that with Jim Knowles. I just like, maybe it's like how much better can you actually be? It's like, oh, we were number 4 and never get number 1. That's great. That's awesome. That might actually get you a long way. Maybe that gets you, through the semifinal game. I'm not entirely sure. Just like the next steps that Penn State had to take were not on defense. You had to make sure you maintained it, but that's not where the gains are going to be made. You could have lost ground. You definitely could have lost ground, and they didn't. And I don't think they will. But that's not where the new levels for this program are going to be found, in my opinion.
No, I agree. But it would have been a heck of a thing to be like, Drew Allar's back. He got even better. They added receivers in the portal. These 2 running backs. It's the best running back tandem in the country. They have a lot back in the offensive line, and our defense is not championship caliber. That would have been a heck of a reality for Penn State next year.
Yeah.
So this feels like that's taking that reality off the board. Like that's not what's going to happen. So
I think that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So I do think it's like an A+ hire for Penn State. It's sort of like, right.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, it's one of those things. It's like you come home with your report card and you're like, maybe you're more of a STEM kid. Maybe you're more of like a, literature, English, foreign languages kind of kid. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're getting like, I don't know, B's, B minuses, C's in math and science, and you're always getting A's in English, and then you come home and you're like, I got an A+ in English. Everybody's like, yeah, I know, but can we raise the science grade a little bit? Right? That's what you're saying, Dad.
You're describing my report card. It's actually what you're doing. I have those conversations often.
But when you said to your parents, but I got an A+ in English, they were like, we know. They weren't particularly impressed by you continuing to be good at that?
No, they said, can you go figure out algebra, please? And I was like, I'll try, but probably not.
I'll try. Yeah. Go figure out algebra, please. Okay. So I do think, by the way, I did the math I included the projection for this 2025 NFL draft, who's expected to go in the first 3 rounds for Penn State. So it's this will be the 11th draft since James Franklin's been at Penn State. Players taken in the top 3 rounds. This surprised me a little bit because haven't we thought of Penn State as a defense first program kind of for a long time? Would you say?
Yeah.
28 players drafted in the first 3 rounds. I'm including the 3 guys expected to be drafted there this year: Abdul Carter, Ty Warren, and KJ Winston, the safety. 15 offense, 13 defense. 8 of those 13 on defense edge guys. So they've had a good run of edge guys. And Abdul Carter is just the capper to that. Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Arnold Ebikidi, Micah Parsons, Jason Noe, Yatur Gross-Matos, and Carl Nassib. So like there's some dudes there. But anyway, part of it is who gets drafted. I mean, edge guys and corners and quarterbacks and receivers get drafted. Like, so I mean, it's it's not an end all be all, but it's just a reminder. So, but I think part of that point was, to me, is that they've had very good defensive talent. But they've also needed, it's not so overwhelming that it's like it doesn't matter who coaches the defense. I think the coordinators have really mattered, and nobody is underestimating the Penn State defensive talent. So anyway, good marriage.
It is a good marriage. We can talk more about like on the field, because I'm one of the tension points of Jim Knowles at Ohio State was like he never really totally got to run his full deal, and well, James Franklin let him do that. I think is a fascinating discussion that now we get into after this.
Okay, well, you want to get into it right now. So what it means for Ohio State? What does this mean for Ohio State as Jim Knowles leaves? We can talk about what they're going to do, but why don't you talk about first what you're sort of describing with what Jim Knowles did at Oklahoma State and how far down the line he got to that at Ohio State versus where he might get at Penn State. Because part of the thing of what this means for Ohio State is that we'll never get to see like the full Knowles. What percent of the Knowles do you think we saw in the end at Ohio State with him?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, because he has this package where it's like a hybrid front, right? With 3 down linemen and a guy that he calls the float player. He called it the Leo at Oklahoma State. They called it the Jack at Ohio State, even though they never really used it at Ohio State, save for Knowles' first year. So, but that became the base defense at Oklahoma State. So it's like, well, if that's the base defense, then maybe we saw like 0%, right, of Knowles at Ohio State. But like, if I can remove all that kind of confusing information there, I would say we saw probably most of what Jim Knowles would like to be as a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, save for that one thing with the way that they use the front, because Ohio State with Larry Johnson as its defensive line coach has just always been a like very strict 4-down team, 2 tackles, 2 ends. That's what we're doing. And they never really deviated from that much. Even this season, when they did retinker some things a little bit, we saw like a couple of snaps of it against Indiana, and then it kind of went away. But like the 3 high safety structure that Jim Knowles is known for, the 4-2-5 base nickel, that kind of stuff, like that was all there. That was all very apparent in Ohio State's championship run. So that'll be what you see from Penn State's defense. The thing that I was alluding to was just the stuff with the front, especially maybe although Abdul Carter would be like a menace in that role if Jim Knowles ever got to use him in it, because it is for all intents and purposes like a hybrid linebacker lineman, and Abdul Carter was both. So I wonder if Penn State will get into that, or if Penn State, which also recruits to a 4-down scheme or might just look more like what we've seen from Ohio State the last 3 years under Jim Knowles. That could be something we talk with Jim Knowles about when we're sitting in his office in the spring, when we have that sit down with him. We talk about the Eagles and why he's Penn State.
Yeah, no. It's funny. It's like, and a lot of people know this. Penn State will find this out. Like Jim Knowles' sister is very active on social media, and sometimes like she's standing up for her brother, and that's good. But like, she gets behind the team. But her whole social media timeline, publicly at least, shifted to Go Birds for like the last 2 days.
Oh,
just
priorities.
Go Birds. Yeah. How you feeling, by the way? You good?
I feel great. Yeah.
Bill is an Eagles fan. If you're here for the first time, Bill enjoys the Philadelphia Eagles. So the thing about Ohio State is, again, like we can talk about it now. We can save it for after the break. Ohio State's had good defensive coordinators. Jeff Hafley was a good defensive coordinator in 2019, the very first defensive coordinator hire that Ryan Day made. He left after a year to be the head coach at Boston College. I think that surprised Ohio State. They maybe weren't quite ready for it. They thought they'd have him for at least 2 years. Ryan Day, as a result, then reached for the familiar. He reached for Kerry Combs, who had been an excellent cornerbacks coach at Ohio State, had worked with Ryan Day, was in the NFL at that point with Mike Vrabel with the Tennessee Titans. I think maybe, I don't know this for sure, but he left Ohio State, I think maybe because he didn't get a chance to be a coordinator. I don't know. But then he came back to call plays. He'd never done it before. And then just like it didn't go very well in 2020 and 2021. They still made the national title game in 2020. But then, so they were like the Knowles hire, they were coming off of that, right? That's not where this hire is coming off of. Like they had to go find somebody because their defense they felt like was not championship caliber. They were broken. It wasn't not that they weren't championship caliber. There was a period from 2018 through 2021, 4 years, where for 3 of those years they were some of the worst defensive years Ohio State's ever had. Which is now, this is your proof of like, Doug, you ding dong, assistant coaches matter, right?
Yes.
2018 is Greg Schiano running the defense with help from Alex Grinch in year one there. Like, I think Alex Grinch thought he was coming in to be the defensive coordinator, right? And then Greg Schiano didn't take the Tennessee job, and they wound up having to work together. And they had the linebackers actually get up on top of the defensive tackles, like ride them piggyback style. And we always thought, why is Pete Werner 4 inches from the center? And now here comes a throw right over the linebackers because there's nobody in the middle of the field. I don't know. I'm not a coach. That wasn't great in 18. 19 days first day, they fix it with Hafley. Then Hafley leaves 2021. But the point of that is also like Jeff Hafley, like that was Ryan Day knew him from San Francisco. He had not been a college play caller before. Worked great. Now also Chase Young and Jeff Okuda. That really helps. So, but they're in such a different place right now that you from a broken defense 3 of 4 years at Ohio State to where they are now. They should be able to figure this out. This means that they're going to miss him. They're going to miss Jim Knowles. Mm-hmm. But it's a reasonable expectation to say they should find a way to be fine. And fine to me is maybe even not quite as good, but still pretty good. Fine is a defense that allows them to compete once again at the top of the sport next year and does not hold them back. Shouldn't they be able to do that?
Yeah, I think so. They were gonna be worse, right? They were the best defense in the country. I think we can say that. I'm comfortable saying that. They're returning 3 starters? So
3 starters. Davison Ignos, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, 3 starters.
Yeah, and Jermaine Matthews is like a quasi starter at cornerback too.
Sure. 3.5.
But yeah, so we'll call it 3.5. So that's a lot of change. That means you're probably going to take some kind of step back from being the best defense in college football, but still like no reason that Ohio State shouldn't always be very good on defense. I think because there were personnel issues too in that run of 3 or 4 years because they had some recruiting misses, especially in the back end. Like the 2018 secondary was not good. Or like 2020, 21, like they were missing some defensive line stuff, some linebacker stuff. There were some recruiting missteps, like the bill came due a little bit there in that period. And I think they've done a better job since then of making sure that doesn't happen again. So yes, that's a long way of me agreeing with you that like they should be able to navigate this loss of a defensive coordinator much better than they did the last time Ryan Day had to do this.
Yeah. And you lose those 4 guys up front. You lose Cody Simon as the heartbeat of the defense at linebacker. You lose Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock and Lathan Ransom on the back end. Like, yeah, it's going to be different. So we'll get into the specifics of maybe what Ohio State can and should do in a second. But first of all, November 1st. It's a Halloween game. I love Penn State, Ohio State being a Halloween game. I think it should be official, just like that Alabama-Tennessee game. What do they call it? The name of the Tennessee-Alabama rivalry is when it's played. Isn't it called like the 3rd Saturday in October? That's how they name it down there. Yeah, I think that's what it's like in the South. They like write like their grocery list on their arms so they can always remember it. It's like, oh, should we name the Tennessee-Alabama rivalry? It's like, yeah, but I can never remember when it is. What if we name it when it is? Oh, that makes it so easy. See you on the 3rd Saturday in October for the 3rd Saturday in October. The thing is itself. I just think they should call Ohio State Penn State like whatever. Halloween Madness or something. That's not great. You can come up with something better than that.
Yeah, I don't know. Halloween Madness. The spooky series.
The spooky series. Woo! Just an excuse for me to dress like Blossom. Hey, everybody. Let's learn about bullying in today's episode. I'm Blossom. I'm the defensive coordinator for... I thought she was very good on The Big Bang Theory. I thought she elevated that show. I really enjoyed The Big Bang Theory, but she made it better. This was already going to be a huge game. Penn State and Ohio State are going to be in the top 5. Both of them are going to be in the top 5 in the preseason. Everybody, I was talking to people at Ohio State, like I think at the celebration, like obviously like what happened here, and Michigan did the same thing. Michigan did it first, but like this is the model. And somebody said to me like, yeah, Penn State's trying to do it now. Like this is the whole deal. Like we get it. It works. Why wouldn't Penn State try to do what the last 2 national champions who used to be in their division in the Big Ten did? So this is going to be a gigantic game anyway, but like how much spice does Jim Knowles, Nittany Lion, add to this game? Or is it like, what spice do you need? It's gonna be like 2 versus 3.
I mean, it doesn't need much more spice, but it'll have some extra spice on it now.
Yeah.
It'll be like, I remember like when Ryan Day early in his career, when he was a coordinator and first as a head coach, like the familiarity he had with Don Brown, the Michigan defensive coordinator, like lit a little bit of an extra fire under him. And how could you be any more familiar than Ryan Day and Jim Knowles are? And then have it to end this way, like that'll be a pretty charged up matchup. I think Ohio State's offense against Penn State's defense when we get to that game.
Do you want to do 30 seconds on this? We have so much to do in the show, Landis. God, it's good to be back. Do you feel invigorated?
Yeah, I do.
I love it. I love our audience. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly, what if he goes to the NFL? There's like reports of he could be in the mix in Jacksonville or Houston. Fascinating. Like Chip Kelly to go be CJ Stroud's offensive coordinator with like completing that Day Kelly Stroud triangle, because Day and Stroud obviously are really important to each other, would be fascinating. If Ohio State had to lose one, but definitely could keep the other, what would be better for Ohio State? Keep Chip Kelly, lose Jim Knowles, or keep Jim Knowles, lose Chip Kelly?
Man, that's really tough,
isn't it?
I would say maybe keep Kelly.
It's getting hot in here, so lose all your coordinators. I am getting so hot. Jim Knowles went to Penn State. Whoop.
You're really good at off the cuff songs. I think losing. I think losing Knowles and keeping Kelly would be preferable, only because of the special relationship between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. The idea of Chip Kelly leaving Ohio State after 1 year, I think, is far more interesting than Jim Knowles leaving. Because
No, go ahead. Finish.
Because what does Ryan Day do? It was such a struggle for Ryan Day to give up play calling. And he finally felt comfortable giving it up to the guy who's known his entire life. Yes, he did give it to Bill O'Brien first, but he checked with Chip Kelly before he hired Bill O'Brien. Chip Kelly wasn't ready to leave UCLA, and then Bill O'Brien went to BC, and then Chip Kelly was suddenly ready to leave UCLA again. So like that was Ryan Day's first choice, was Chip Kelly, because of the trust that he has in him. There is not another Chip Kelly out there. So this will require, or hypothetically, I guess at this point, require Ryan Day to turn his offense over to someone that at the very least he does not know as well as he knows Chip Kelly. And maybe he doesn't speak the same offensive language the way that he and Chip Kelly do.
So this is my sitcom moment of this. What if Chip Kelly, the most important thing he did was to teach Ryan Day how to trust? And
how to let go. Yeah.
How to let go. And that Chip Kelly would go into Ryan Day's office and tell him he's leaving. And Ryan Day would say, but Chip, there aren't any other Chip Kellys out there. And then Chip Kelly would put his arm on his shoulder and say, yeah, there are, Ryan. Yeah, there are. And then it's one of those where Ryan Day like goes to the grocery store and everybody in the grocery store has a Chip Kelly head. And what Chip Kelly did, the most valuable thing that Chip Kelly allowed Ryan Day to do, is to believe in himself and to trust and to realize everybody's a Chip Kelly if you believe in them and believe in yourself and treat them the right way. Isn't that what we want in the world? Everybody's Chip Kelly. Everybody's like a 58-year-old kind of little squad offensive coordinator. Hey, everybody's Chip Kelly. So that, but I'm not even being facetious about that, because the other thing about Chip Kelly is like he got his guy over the top. His guy was struggling a little bit. I mean, like struggling. Again, it's like always, everything with Ryan Day is like, I don't know. And it's like, I mean, other than having the best winning percentage in college football history, I don't know about that guy. So, but like, right, Ryan Day wasn't getting all the way to where he wanted to go. And then he hired his mentor, and his mentor helped Ryan Day get over the top. It's like, it's the end of the story. So I don't know that it would be weird. I think if this show ever wins, well, I don't know what winning would be. If Paul Feinbaum comes on our show and says, not only is the North better than the South, this show is better than anything I've ever done, I'm quitting the next day. That's it. Going out on top. What's better than going out on top?
It would be peaking very early. Is there any part of you that wonders if this steers us back to Ryan Day's like, I got a ring, man. I'm calling plays. I don't care what you think. Have fun in the NFL, Chip. I'm taking the sticks back.
Plus, based on what you said, like the belief that like part of the playoff stuff was maybe Ryan Day like reasserting himself a little bit more, especially in the pass game part of the offense, because you have a little bit more time for game prep in the playoff.
Yeah, but he didn't have his head buried in a play sheet during the game.
Yeah,
like that's the difference, right? Like,
and
I don't have much of an issue with Ryan Day being involved with the offensive game planning. He does it very well. There just needs to be a built-in system that allows him to leave the room when he has to leave the room. And there wasn't for the first 5 years of his tenure, and there was this past season.
Also, by the way, a guy who's out there, if it really happens, he could bring Kevin Wilson back and maybe empower Kevin Wilson to an even greater degree. No, you're not there?
I mean, he could. Don't I wouldn't be pounding the table for that. No.
But the all part of it too is like I really think when this program hit the low it hit after the Michigan loss, that Ryan Day brought this team back and these players brought this team back, but Ryan Day was there with them and was not like, I got to go watch film, right? Like that. The number one thing after Ohio State's loss to Michigan was not, I got to watch Tennessee film. It was, we have to come back together and find a way to play our best. And like that happened. And I think him not having to be worried about what are our best 7 third and short calls against the Tennessee defense, I think him not having to do that was very helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe you're right. Maybe this year just he needed someone to Sherpa him through a year, realizing that he didn't need to be everything all at once. Or I don't know. Now that you've done it, it's just like you get empowered a little bit. And Ohio State is very eager, I think, to get Ryan Day inked to like a longer term deal.
Yep.
They were very transparent about that at the championship ceremony. So Ryan Day like would have some leverage, I guess, if he wanted to go that way and retake the play calling. I actually have no idea what would happen if Chip Kelly were to leave, but I actually hadn't thought of Kevin Wilson either. That's maybe like a very obvious solution. Although like I said, I wouldn't be super juiced up about that one.
Yeah. Okay. There was a lot. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we are going to talk about other coordinator movement in the North this offseason. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, producer Mike. We would invite you to like the show. We would invite you to subscribe to the show. We would invite you to tell a friend about the show. We are fired up about how this season went for Northern football. But Landis, I just think there's a ton of super interesting stuff that is going to be percolating in the North this offseason as we build to 2025. Like I'm juiced, man.
I'm excited to take some time now that we've gotten past the national championship and the marathon that was to go through the playoff, which was incredible. It was fun. I'm not complaining about it, but we need to like reset and dive back in on all 28 teams. So I'm glad to have some time to do that.
And we're going to start to do that right now, at least a little bit, because we want to talk about 28 Northern teams that we cover. And you guys know them by now. Again, it's a good thing to test yourself. It's just like one of those things. I'm getting older. Sometimes you like to do like mental, like brain exercises. Instead of Sudoku, just name the 28 teams that are part of Kings of the North, right? You do ever do it, Landis? Like it's a good thing to do when you're sitting down and take care of business.
I like to do it backwards as I'm trying to fall asleep.
Oh, thinking about Kings of the North puts me to sleep. I value the Big Ten East and West because that still always helps me remember all the Big Ten teams because I think of them that way, even though they aren't that way anymore. So 56 Northern coordinator spots, right? That's 28 times 2. It's 56. 17 will be new. 17 of the 56 will be new as it stands right now. And there's one that I'm a little not exactly sure on. Maybe it makes it 18, but I'm going to call it 17. Will be new. And that's like not counting like there's a couple open spots still that haven't been filled, but it's 10 defensive coordinators who are going to be different and 7 offensive coordinators who are going to be different. And this is at least, Bill, at least. And of course, part of this is we had 2 staffs wiped out, although not completely, with West Virginia and Purdue. So that's like an of course. But like this, I don't know. I don't have the past numbers on this. Does this feel like a lot to you? Not a lot. 17 of 56 new.
It's maybe a little lower than I would have anticipated.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it feels maybe like not that much. Yeah.
Okay. 30%. I don't know. And there are some places where, like Brett Bielema, for instance, he had a reset over the weekend with the Illinois media. And I think talking about like Aaron Henry as the defensive coordinator, Barry Lunny Jr. as the offensive coordinator, they were very excited to have them coming back for 2025, but he is anticipating Illinois' success. At some point, those guys, I think he was talking about them as leaving for a head coaching job, right? So there's the difference here too and this is one of the things we're going to get into, is the movement caused by guys leaving for other jobs / better jobs / higher paying jobs, or guys getting fired? So I also think like that is, one's good, and like good, the school would hope to retain him, but it's like, well, if the guy did such a good job with us that a school with more resources is going to throw a bunch of money at him. Like that just means we've done a good job in hiring that guy, developing that guy, giving that guy the players and the opportunity to succeed. And he succeeded. He succeeded so well, somebody else came for him, that's happening in a particular area versus that didn't work, fired. So it really matters how people leave, does it not?
It certainly does matter how people leave. If we had a bunch of, well, I was going to say if we have a bunch of guys moving on because they're good, that'd be great. But it also depends on where they were going.
Yeah, no, we got to talk
specifically
about
which part of the country they were going to.
Oh, sometimes when they're reading their rivalry names off their arms, they're also saying, how should we get better at Steel Northern coaches? SNC. The strategy in the South. We'll talk about in a second. I do want to get to Notre Dame, though, first. So we're going to do Notre Dame and Ohio State, what they should do now, because these are the 2 national championship teams, Bill, that both lost their defensive coordinators. We just covered Jim Knowles, and then Al Golden was hired by the Cincinnati Bengals after doing a very good job as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. Let's do Ohio State. So these are like, this is, I guess, again, it's not weird. It's not weird, but it is something that these 2 teams just played each other for it all, and they both have to go find new DCs, right?
It's I think borderline expected, right? When you get to that,
yeah.
I guess, the Jim Knowles thing is a little surprising, but when you are good and you get to the championship, people want your coaches. So it's not weird that they happen sort of separately in a vacuum, that they both happen, that there's some connections between potential replacements. That's a little strange.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with Notre Dame first. So Al Golden's hired by the Cincinnati Bengals, and there are reports from Notre Dame reporters right now, Pete Sampson among them, that they are looking hard at Chris Ash, who has been in the NFL the last 3 seasons, which I wasn't even aware of. But Chris Ash was a former Wisconsin defensive coordinator, a former Arkansas defensive coordinator, and then was hired by Ohio State before the 2014 season and helped come win a national championship with Ohio State. Part of that I always called as like Urban Meyer finishing school assistants who really were making it clear they want to be a head coach. That was part of why he came to Ohio State. He made it very clear. I sat in Chris Ash's office and had a very long conversation about this with him for a story that I wrote. He came to Ohio State so he could get to be a head coach. And then he got to be a head coach at Rutgers and flamed out. Like 3.5 years, did not work at all. Wound up then back in Texas at some point with Tom Herman, who he had worked with at Ohio State, and basically has kind of been bouncing around since then. So I think there might be some people who are like, Chris Ash? I don't know. But all Chris Ash is, to me, Bill, is a very good defensive coordinator who was not a good head coach. But I think he might be a very good defensive coordinator for Notre Dame if that's what they actually do.
I think he could be. I mostly agree with you. Yeah, I don't know if there's a universe where Chris Ash is a good head coach, but it wasn't going to be at Rutgers. The
Yeah.
combination of like where he's from, Ottumwa,
Drake.
Iowa. Is that how you say it?
Iowa.
Yeah.
He's part of the
Like,
Drake tree.
yeah. So a guy from Iowa goes to Jersey and tries to be Urban Meyer. It's not a cocktail. It's going to go down smooth, So I just didn't work out for him as a head coach, but I think pretty well respected defensive mind, and he has been out of sight, out of mind. I think this past season he was a scout. I don't even think he was coaching this past year in the NFL. Urban Meyer brought him to the NFL when he went to Jacksonville, and I think Chris was with the Raiders for a year, then went back to Jacksonville to be a scout for Trent Baalke. So it's been a weird road to get Chris Ash back to college football, assuming that Notre Dame does finalize this. But I do think there are some defensive coordinator bona fides there that you can be reasonably excited about. I think it's a bit of a scheme change for Notre Dame if they go this way, but that's okay. You don't have to stick to the.
I mean, unless Marcus Freeman says, "I'm hiring you to run my defense."
Yeah, which could be the case, right? Or some mix of ideologies is typically how it goes anyway. So it's not. It actually feels a bit like hiring Al Golden, if I'm being honest, because Al Golden was to a not the same degree, but he's a fired former college head coach, went to the NFL. People kind of forgot about him. It was like, oh, Al Golden's back in college football, and he's doing a really good job. So Chris Ash, I think, could have a very similar arc to Al Golden. So I understand why this would be a desirable candidate for Notre Dame. But I guess the one thing that does make it interesting is that there was a pretty compelling in-house option with Mike Mickens, who is also a defensive backs coach in the same way that Chris Ash is. So I've found myself wondering in the day or so since this news came out, what that might mean for Mike Mickens in South Bend.
So I think the Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State situations, they all have that internal guy that you wonder about. Ohio State situation is slightly different, but Anthony Poindexter at Penn State, and again, it feels like the reporting there, they were maybe going to go that way with promoting him from within. He's staying to work with Knowles, which again if everybody can get on the same page, can be a great thing for the program, and it would just set Anthony Poindexter up to be an even better candidate. Not that he won't be ready now as a defensive coordinator at Penn State or elsewhere down the road. Mike Mickens is only 37 years old. I talked to him a lot at one of the media days during the playoff. Do you know who's the guy that got him into coaching, by the way, which is kind of an interesting little side story?
I don't know.
Kerry Combs. So Mike Mickens was played at Cincinnati, and then when he got done, he kind of wanted to get into coaching, and Kerry Combs helped get him into that. And so he's very Kerry Combs, again, who we talked about, was the Ohio State defensive coordinator that didn't work out, and then actually was at Cincinnati this season and is not coming back to that Cincinnati staff. Anyway, I think Mike Mickens is ready to be a defensive coordinator, but it's just very hard, Bill. And the conversation for Ohio State, and we'll get there in a second, with Matt Guerrieri, who is the internal candidate, the best one at Ohio State. He's at least been a defensive coordinator before. I just don't know when you're at the highest level. I would put Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, who all made the Final Four. They are at the highest level of college football. Ohio State's at the highest, but they are winning. They are succeeding as much as you can succeed. Do you just owe it to your program to be in best guy for the job mode with hires like this, regardless?
Sure.
As opposed to this guy is a really good guy in his job. He has given so much to this program. He's maybe never done it, but I think he's going to be really good. But should this program this season, with the goals they have, be the time to try that? I am very conflicted about that kind of thing, and I think it applied to Poindexter. I think it applies to Mickens. I think it applies to Guerrieri at least a little.
But are those always mutually exclusive? Can that guy can best man for the job and the guy you just described be the same guy?
I think it's hard for people who have never done something to maybe do it at a huge program for the first time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are a bunch of people out there who have called defenses before who would come be the Notre Dame defensive coordinator. There are a bunch of people who have called defenses before who would come be it at Ohio State or Penn State. And again, Guerrieri has done it at Duke and Indiana, right? So it's a different conversation when we get there in a second. So if you can work out a thing where like you bring in a guy like Ash, who's been there, but you tell him that Mike Mickens is going to be incredibly empowered as a co-DC maybe, and that you want Mike Mickens to have a ton of input on the game plan because the program will be better. Mike Mickens has earned that. And he just and you want Mike Mickens to get more prepped to be a defensive play caller. I just don't know. I do have some hesitation at one of the 8 or 10 best programs in the country hiring anybody to do a job who's never done it before.
You're also talking about 2 programs with Ohio State and Notre Dame who did that with the head coaching position and have been rewarded.
I know. Quit bringing your fancy stats, Landis.
Well, I'm just
I know.
Might Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day be more predisposed to a level of comfort
maybe
with the kind of guy you're talking about because they were that guy?
Maybe. And the thing I differentiate this, and this is a lot with Ohio State stuff, is are you hiring the guy down the hall because it's easy and comfortable? Or are you hiring the guy down the hall because you know him intimately and you understand how smart he is, his connection with players, how hard he works, how dedicated he is, and you have a better handle on him than anybody that you would interview from the outside. You've worked with this guy every day. And if you're like, Mike, I've watched this guy grow into it. Okay. But I think Ryan Day, for instance, some of his hires internally have been that, and some of his hires have been the easy, comfortable hire down the hall, and the guy was by far not the best guy for the job. So I'm just wary of this, Landis. You've got to be the best. There's no excuse for Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State in these situations to not hire the best guy available. So that guy is in your building? We're sure he's in your building? I don't know.
No, but the flip of it is true too. Like I believe in this guy. It may not be obvious to you that he's in the building, but I think he is in the building, so I'm going to hire him, right? And you just got to be strong in that conviction and make the hire if that's what you believe in. And if you're wrong, then you deal with the consequences of being wrong. But I don't know that one path is like inherently flawed. It's just about whether or not you as the head coach, have the awareness and foresight to project that out, right? So it's hard, right? If it were easy, then people wouldn't miss.
Mike Mickens helped Leonard Moore as a true freshman be ready to play after Ben Morrison got hurt. Mike Mickens lost an All-American in his position room, was like, we're good. So like, I don't know. I'm not in the room. I don't know that I have a strong opinion on what Notre Dame should do. I'm not against an Ash type hire. What do you think Notre Dame should do?
Yeah, I'm not against an Ash type hire either. I would be quite comfortable with Mickens being elevated. And I do think there's depends on what the motivation is, right? Because I think sometimes you put yourself in a position where like, oh, we got to promote Mike Mickens because if we don't, we're going to lose Leonard Moore. It's like, I'm not saying Leonard Moore's not a good player, but like we're going to lose player X cannot be your motivation for making assistant coaching choices. I believe Mike Mickens can do this job, so I want to promote him. So, but like I like what I've seen from him. So like I would be very comfortable with that if that were the way that Notre Dame went. But I understand wanting a little more experience in that and maybe helping Mike Mickens continue to grow a little bit as a coach. So I would. It's not splashy to bring Chris Ash back to college football to do this. So I understand that reaction to it, but I don't know that it has to be splashy as long as it's smart. So
yeah,
maybe that's the right course for Marcus Freeman. So I'm not to sit on a fence, but I think I would be good with either path. I suppose if I had to make a choice, I don't know. I would elevate Mike Mickens and figure the rest out.
Yeah. Mike Mickens is super impressive. He's 37 years old. He's going to be a DC or a head. I mean, he's going to be elevated at some point. I just don't know if it's right now for a team coming off the national championship game. What should Ohio State do? The floor is yours.
Again, I'm a bit of two minds. I think if Ohio State was willing to make Jim Knowles the highest paid coordinator and defensive coordinator in college football, then they should be financially willing to go get whoever they want. Like I'm thinking of guys like just some of the top coordinators in college football, like Danton Lynn at USC. He just got a new deal because he's a Penn State grad, and Penn State was looking for a defensive coordinator. But like, you should be able to go get him if you want him. You should be able to go get Phil Parker, if you want Phil Parker, John Haycock, if you want him, like they're like run down the list of the 10 best coordinators, Blake Baker at LSU in college football. If you want them, go get them. I'm reminded when Ryan Day hired Jim Knowles, there was a lot of talk about being systematic with the defense, and I think that was mostly a commentary on like what Ohio State was before that, which was anything but systematic. They were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what might stick as they tried to get through a season with a really bad defense. But I don't know too if there's something about this hybrid scheme that Jim Knowles ran that Ryan Day really likes and thinks might be almost necessary in college football moving forward. And if that's the case, then he has an in-house candidate, McArary, who you've mentioned, who has run this scheme. He was a GA for Knowles at Duke. He took over at Duke as a defensive play caller after Knowles left there in 2018, called plays at Duke for 4 seasons, called plays in Indiana for, I think, at least part of a season. Tom Allen took it back because Tom Allen was on tilt before he got fired in Indiana. He's 35, McArary is. So like he's a young, still rather inexperienced play caller, but like 5 years of play calling experience ain't nothing. He was like a Broyles nominee at that time, I think, like an AFCA like assistant of the year finalist, maybe one of those years he was at Duke. I think he's pretty well regarded as a fairly sharp guy, McArary, and he's from Northeast Ohio, for whatever that matters. It wasn't random that Ryan Day, during the championship celebration that Ohio State had on Sunday, when running through his assistant coaches, said of McArary, like he's one of the brightest minds in college football and a star on the rise, or something to that effect. That felt like a rather strong endorsement for a guy who's just the safeties coach. So what do I think they should do? I think Ryan Day should just go hire whoever he thinks is the absolute best person for the job. And maybe that's McArary, and we'll have to see if that pans out. But I do wonder if scheme continuity might rule the day here, because you would have that if you promote McArary.
But didn't Ryan Day, when Jeff Hafley, after Jeff Hafley left, and everybody was talking about like, oh, Hafley left after a year, Ryan Day was like very forceful with like, this is my defense. This is what I want to play. It's not a Hafley scheme. Like, I want to go about it a certain way. And then actually, like, I think he, over the course of his coaching career, has like kind of changed his mind on that, whatever, I mean, he's an offensive guy, but right. Remember that? It was like the whole single high versus too high, and like what Ryan Day wanted to do.
I think he preferred that scheme, but then he hired a defensive coordinator who had never run that scheme and then told him to run it.
Right.
That was the misstep.
Do you view the Notre Dame and Ohio State searches differently, or are they in the same kind of thing? Like, it's like Guerreri and Mickens as an internal candidate, who are both young risers.
They're different because Marcus Freeman's a defensive-minded head coach and Ryan Day isn't.
Oh, so that's the difference. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you would be more comfortable with maybe Notre Dame elevating at DC because the head coach is defensive-minded than Ohio State elevating at DC because the head coach is offensive-minded.
Yeah, I think it's probably slightly more risky for Ohio State. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. I do think you have to at least talk to people. Like if Ohio State announces at 4:00 today that McArary is the defensive coordinator, I'm not sure I would be down with that, because I think you have to. I would at least get out and see who's interested, who maybe has a philosophy that could really help you. Like I wouldn't be in a hurry to just promote the internal guy when you just lost somebody who's now the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country.
I don't think you have to hurry either, because the portal window's closed. I think you can be a little patient. Spring ball doesn't start for about another 6 weeks or so, maybe more than that. So they can take their time. They can see maybe what shakes out from the NFL, that kind of thing. I don't think that Ohio State needs to have scheme continuity necessarily. I'm just acknowledging that would be mighty convenient if they could.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, they got like, I don't know who Jeff Hafley was before Ohio State hired him in 2019, right? Mm-hmm. They paired him with Greg Madison, who is like,
right.
So maybe that's a path. Like, maybe there's a young NFL guy who you can pair, because you have Tim Walton on staff, who's coached in the NFL and coached in college, obviously has coordinator experience at both levels. Like, can you do a co-DC Tim Walton and hotshot young dude from the NFL who you're bringing up kind of thing? Maybe. I don't know. Aside from that, like, I don't think you elevate Tim Walton to like just full-time DC Maybe you can co-it with Walton and Guerreri. One of them has to call the plays, and then you go hire somebody else maybe to coach safeties. So you don't have two position coaches trying to co-DC. I don't know. I know, like, anytime there's a Big Ten coordinator job around, like, oh, what's Jim Leonard doing? Because he's in the NFL as like the Broncos passing game coordinator, I think. But I also I've seen some reporting that people
there were just reports this morning. There were just reports this morning that like he's staying with Denver, but had options to interview for other defensive coordinator jobs in the NFL. I don't know what that means for college, but it seems like he's if he's staying in the NFL, he's staying in Denver. That was out this morning. I think he
so I don't know.
Okay.
Like that. I mean, that if like Ohio State hired Jim Leonard, I'd be like, all right, good for you, Ryan Day. That's a heck of a pull. So
I mean, I was thinking the Hafley, Greg Madison stuff again for people like Jeff Hafley was the play caller, but Greg Madison, who had been in college and the NFL forever, they brought him in from Michigan. I think to kind of backstop it a little bit, right? Like I wonder, like even with Notre Dame, if you hire Ash, could he just be like the Mickens backstop a little bit of like, listen, I've done this, you haven't. If Marcus Freeman, like maybe that, I don't know what the full story is, but like to say Chris Ash, who like doesn't have a job.
Yeah, hey, I don't think people are like banging down Chris Ash's door to like, you know what I mean? So
Mike Mickens is going to be the play caller, but they're co-DCs and Chris Ash is to help, just to be here as a backstop for a guy who's never done it before. That I'd be down with that. You down with that?
Yeah, I'd be down with that. I don't mind
better than the Chris Ash scheme coming to save South Bend. It's like, what are you talking about? We're fine. That's not what this is. All right, let's run through. We're going long. Let's run through some other staffs really quickly. So new staffs at West Virginia and Purdue. This is just like, again, these are some of the guys that we're talking about. We have all these turnovers at Purdue. Josh Henson's the new offensive coordinator with Barry Odom as a head coach. He came from USC, and Mike Shear followed Barry Odom from UNLV. So there's going to be continuity on that defensive side of the ball. There's a chance, and Odom's a defensive guy, that Purdue snaps the finger and plays pretty good defense next year, no?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like that side of the ball is a little easier to like turn around faster than offense, but I could be drastically, I probably am drastically underselling the difficulties of doing it on either side of the ball. But I do think with a defensive-minded head coach, whatever side of the ball that coach is on, I think probably stands pretty good chance of being the one that hits the ground running a little better.
Yeah. Okay. The West Virginia. So West Virginia offensively, I apologize for this. Chad Scott was the offensive coordinator last year, but like that's a Neil Brown offense at West Virginia. He was retained on staff. He was the interim head coach for the bowl game. Rich Rodriguez retained him, but like on their website, he's not listed as an OC. He's just listed as the running backs coach. So they don't have somebody listed as an offensive coordinator. And I'm just guessing that's because Rich Rodriguez is calling the plays and maybe they don't have somebody officially with that title. So I apologize if I'm screwing that up.
I mean, Rich Rod has to be calling plays. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but then there's not somebody titled, but do you know, I didn't even know that we have a Ferentz situation bubbling potentially.
His kid's the QB coach, right?
Yeah, Rhett Rodriguez, who's never been a QB coach before, who was like a GA or whatever, an analyst, is now the quarterback coach.
Like working in finance. He was like working in finance, and then they're like, "Oh, you want to coach? You want to work for your dad?" Okay.
I just wanted to be clear that like we are equal opportunity. Nepotism can cram it in college football.
Yeah.
So like that's a ridiculous thing to do. Your son, who's like is now but it's like, well, he's really the quarterback's coach, but it's goofy, and we will monitor it, and it's super goofy. And also, it's super goofy. And I get it, but come on, man, right? Come on.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like if I don't know well enough to know if this is the case or not. My assumption is that's like Rich Rod is like, I'm the OC and I'm the QB coach. So like literally anybody can do this job.
And then it's just take your kid to work day, but he also gets a salary. It's take your kid to work day 365 days a year.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? I don't like fathers and sons spending time together.
How hard did I ride it when Ohio State's quarterback's coach was Urban Meyer's son-in-law? I didn't let that go for 3 years.
No. And like, because our programs, all college programs, but especially our programs, should hire qualified people.
Yeah. So like, be prepared. Like we're on alert. On the other side of the ball, feels like West Virginia, and this happened a while ago. We didn't cover it a ton here, but they hired Zach Alley, who was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma this year. He had worked with Rich Rod before. That's what created the opening that for a moment people thought Jim Knowles was going to take at Oklahoma, but people kind of made a big deal of that West Virginia kind of took this guy away from Oklahoma. Also at Oklahoma, he was a defensive coordinator for a defensive-minded head coach. Now he's a defensive coordinator for an offensive-minded head coach. I assume that means he had total freedom to do whatever he wants to do. Plus, he's worked with Rich Rod. That side of the ball, this seems great. And I think people at West Virginia are excited about this.
That was a hire that probably flew under the radar more than it should have. To, effectively poach a sitting defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
From an SEC program. Zach Alley does have Rich Rod familiarity. He was like a GA for Brent Venables at Clemson too, I believe. He's actually got a decent resume for a guy who's still pretty young. And the defenses at Oklahoma were good. How much credit do you give him? How much credit goes to Brent Venables is a little hard to kind of divvy out. But I thought this was a pretty nice hire for Rich Rod, because my assumption again with Rich Rod is like he would just like to hand that over to somebody and then never think about defense again. So this might give him an opportunity to do that.
Okay. We're going to go quick on this. We're going over. Hang in. We're going over. Shocked. Doug hasn't been able to talk for money for 5 days. He went long on the first show back. You would have had. Oh, by the way, we have an announcement. Well, it's not our announcement, but Mike Kadick went to Barstool.
Congrats to Mike Kadick.
If we even, we didn't. I mean, he was going to do his thing, and when we had him on before the national title game to break down Indiana Notre Dame, he said then, like, I'm not doing the NFL. I'm looking to get in the media thing, and I knew he had some interviews scheduled with some people, but he was already on social media today, snapping to John Gruden.
Oh yeah.
That's
going to be a nice time for him. I hope we want to still have him on the show though. Don't forget.
Yeah, have him back as a friend, as a guest. He's a friend of the program. He was in the chat. He was in our chats when we were in Atlanta. So great guy. Best of luck to Mike Kadick. We've been lucky to have him on 3 times here, and we certainly enjoyed every time he was on. The offensive moves versus the defensive moves here. Just to run through this quick, this is my whole point here. All the defensive coordinator moves from the North were because guys got hired away, and all the offensive coordinator moves because guys got fired. So like, I had us down to talk for 10 minutes about this. We can talk about it for 1 minute, but what does that tell you, football knower Bill Landis?
We need to score more points in the North. I don't know. That's like not surprising though, right? That's like been the Northern ethos as long as football's existed. The North doesn't score a lot of points and plays good defense, but maybe teams are trying to buck that trend.
So like some of the moves we're talking about here, what I'm going by when I said there's 17 new coordinators, and I thought like if it would be 18, I didn't know what to do with Chad Scott because he was the OC, but he's still on staff. So maybe it's actually 18. But like it's like wild to me. Like the offensive coordinator stuff, there's a lot of guys who lost their job in the middle of last year. Right. So like I count like Wisconsin hiring Jeff Grimes, Phil Longo, right? Like that, they're going to have new coordinators for game 1 compared to what they had game 1 last year. But like the defensive coordinator stuff is all in the offseason. And the big thing, Landis, so it is it, I don't know what it is. Like there's a part of this that like it feels like it's feeding into a cliche about Northern ball, but also we shouldn't be afraid of the fact that we play good defense up here.
No.
Right. I mean, it's just it's a cliche. It's right. But it's because it's real. What does a cliche come from? Some kernel of truth, like good defense in the North.
Yeah, there's good defense in the North. And also like, some of the OC changes were like head coaches either trying to save face and it didn't work anyway, or like very much needing to correct past hiring mistakes, i.e. Local.
Yes. So the other thing that like the trend within the trend is that the South stole our guys. They stole our guys.
Mm-hmm.
4 fairly huge hires of Northern DCs going to the South. We'll run through them here in a second, but like, what do you make of that generally? Is it like they just don't know what to do? They get desperate. They throw money around and they know where to look when they need to fix themselves.
Yeah, I think it's all that. And we need to, so there's the national coaches convention. I feel like we need to have a Northern coaches convention, but there's only one seminar and it's don't be tempted by the sunlight.
Oh yeah. It's there one seminar and the seminar ends with a blood oath of I will not go south. Come on, Tom. Because here's the thing. Because again, here's the thing that's hard. It's like it's one market, but it's two markets. Like it's the free market, whatever. There is the market for coaching salaries. And then there is I'm a desperate Southern team that will throw money at problems market. And I don't think that it's good business for the North. And this is how coaching salaries got driven up. It's a very fine line to walk. Because we're talking about some projects that we're going to do. One of the things we talk about at our company meetings is we're going to do some projects under the KOT and umbrella that aren't just a daily show. And one of the big things is like there was a time when the North was constantly losing coaches to the South because they wouldn't pay their coaches. And now that's not happening as much. So it's like, I guess I would believe it's like the North needs to pay its coaches in a way that keeps them competitive, but also the North should not overpay their coaches just because the South got desperate and threw some money around. That's a very fine line to walk, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I agree with that. I also think there are parallels to player acquisition too. Like the North, I think, was very much on board with official visits being allowed to happen in June because you could bring guys to campus when when it was warm, when it wasn't snowing.
Oh yeah.
But all this coaching carousel stuff happens when the weather in the North is miserable. It's an unintended advantage for the Southern programs that I think we need to nip in the bud.
All right, just to run through those real quick. Tom Allen leaves Penn State to go to Clemson. What do you make of this one? And this is what created the opening for Jim Knowles. Tom Allen did a good job this year.
He did a great job this year. I from what I can tell, this was like Tom Allen wanted to move closer to family, right? Like it's a very much a lateral move. You could even say maybe it's a step down given where Penn State is and where Clemson is right now.
Was Clemson? I can't remember. Was Clemson in the Final Four this year? I can't remember off the top of my head.
No, they made a brief appearance in the playoff. I
don't remember. Okay.
Yeah, I can't recall. If they were there, they weren't there very long. I don't think that was anything other than, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. It seemed like that was mostly like Tom Allen late in his career wants to be in the South, so he took an opportunity to go there. I don't even think that was a money thing because I think Penn State would have been competitive financially with Clemson if it wanted to.
Yeah. He did a good job. Best of luck to Dabo. Yeah. Minnesota loses Corey Heatherman to Miami. They promote Danny Collins within the staff, which is a nice move. I do like this is not Corey Heatherman was only there a year because Joe Rossi left Minnesota to go to Michigan State the year before as a defense coordinator. You really like that hire. This is another thing. I don't mean to fall in love with Minnesota all over again, but I keep just really liking a lot of what they're doing, and them losing coaches is, I think, a sign of success. But what did you think of this? Miami. It's so nice. They named it twice. I thought that was a Will Smith song, but actually it's Rose on Golden Girls. Miami is nice. Miami is nice. Yeah. You ever remember that one, that Golden Girls episode? Rose wrote a theme song for the city of Miami.
I just like that you got it confused with Will Smith's Welcome to Miami. Very, very similar vibes. Yeah.
Betty White, Will Smith. I apologize. In my brain, they're the same person. Miami took Minnesota's defensive coordinator, Landis.
I don't love Minnesota, having to have a third year in a row now with a different defensive coordinator. That's not great, but I mean, I'm glad at least that PJ Fleck thought they had a good internal candidate. I thought Corey Heatherman did a really nice job there at Minnesota this year, like arrived at a weird time with the Joe Rossi departure to Michigan State and did a good job, I think, helping that defense take a step forward. Something about like he's a former James Madison James Madison guy. So is Brian Haynes, who was at Indiana with Chris McKinney, who also got a new deal out of all this coordinator shuffling. So this was one I was kind of bummed by because I thought there were some, and it's not to say Minnesota can't sustain the defensive momentum, but I just thought maybe they had found something with Heatherman, and I'm mad at Miami for taking him.
Tony White left Nebraska to be the defensive coordinator at Florida State. Again, this is not a new move. They promoted John Butler from within, which you, I think, have espoused on the show is not exactly what you would have suggested they do. But again, like this is Tony White. Nebraska got Tony White from Syracuse. And it's one of those things like north on north poaching, like I'm kind of okay with. Like at least we kept them in the north. The South poaching the north. This is, I guess, the thing that I'm not sure about this is, again, like Florida State is definitely moving up from Nebraska. Again, monetarily, I'm sure it is. But I don't know what should be done here to like prevent moves like this? Because on the college football landscape, I don't know. Are we sure Florida State is going to be a better program over the next 2 years than Nebraska?
How many? The Florida State won one game. Is that right? Florida State won once this past
Let me
season?
check. I just don't know what happens in the South.
Yeah, 2 games. They won
maybe
fewer
2
games in Nebraska. I know that much.
Yeah.
It's probably I don't know what that is. Step up, lateral move, step down. I'll call it a step down. He went south. I just didn't think there was a ton of juice behind promoting John Butler because Matt Rule took Tony White away from a program. I love that hire when they did it. And he's a very good defensive coordinator in my opinion. So this was another one where I thought maybe the team that lost the guy in the North could have done a better job of trying to replace it with similar energy and didn't quite do it. But I understand why Florida State wanted him because he's quite good at his job.
He is quite good at his job. The last one is Steve Belichick went home to Papa. So 1-year coordinator with Jed Fish, defensive coordinator at Washington, left to go to North Carolina to be with his dad. I think his name is Bob. But I think Washington got better. They hired Ryan Walters. Again, this is the Tom Allen, Manny Diaz, Chris Ash. Sorry it didn't work out as a head coach, but the whole point of you getting a head coaching job was because you were so good as a DC. I really like the Ryan Walters hire for Washington. The only thing is it cuts away a little bit of their hey, we're an NFL minor league because their coordinators last year were Pete Carroll's kid and Bill Belichick's kid, but Jed Fish will still keep that going. And it feels like Brennan Carroll, the offensive coordinator, maybe isn't in quite as much of a hurry to go work for his dad and just automatically go for the Raiders because his dad has a job again, but who knows? But I think Ryan Walters in Washington is good.
I like that too. This is Ryan recently fired Ryan Walters. I understand the man did not cover himself in glory while in West Lafayette, Indiana, but he's a good defensive coordinator. He was a very good defensive coordinator at Illinois. And I think stands a pretty good chance to be one at Washington. And we didn't talk about this. We were going through some stuff a couple weeks ago. I was just, we were talking about the transfer portal stuff. I actually think Washington is pretty well positioned to also run the kind of scheme that Ryan Walters wants to run with good corners, just playing in your face. Right. So, I'm excited to see how that plays out. So yeah, I guess you lose something by losing the Belichick name from your program, but I actually think Washington probably upgraded here.
Okay. Last 2 defensive coordinator changes, then we'll take a quick break and do offensive coordinator changes. Again, sorry we're running over. Thanks for hanging in with us. Kansas, Brian Borland retired, and they promoted DK McDonald from within. DK McDonald is not a guy who's necessarily a long time Lance Leipold guy. He actually this past season was his first year at Kansas. He was the co-DC. I don't know all the ins and outs of this. It feels like maybe Lance Leipold was preparing a guy to take over when Borland retired. And you know where DK McDonald worked before he went to Kansas, Landis?
Philadelphia Eagles.
For the Birds. So I think so. This is one of those Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State. I would advocate best man for the job. You have the money. Go find him. In or out, whatever you got to do. A place like Kansas, I think having a pipeline and rewarding guys within is a very smart strategy. And getting good coaches on the way up and saying, come work here, we'll bring you in at this level. But then when somebody moves on, we will reward people internally and give you an opportunity. This feels like, and he did it on the offensive side of the ball too, and we'll get to that in a second, but Kansas lost both coordinators, and Leipold promoted from within, kind of made the play caller now. I think it's good. He's been around a long time. He knows what he's doing, but this made sense to me.
I think it makes sense for a program like this. It's I guess dangerous to trust any head coach implicitly, but I think Lance Leipold has a pretty good handle on what he needs at his program. Plus, DK McDonald is a PSAC guy, Division II Pennsylvania college football. So
look at that.
I'm always in favor of PSAC guys getting jobs.
Let's get him on the show. Talk about the Birds. Talk about the PSAC and the Birds.
Yeah.
Last one is Rutgers. I don't think they have a defensive coordinator yet. Is that right? Are we sure? Right? I'm not missing something here.
So Joel Harasimiak left to go to UMass, right?
Yeah, so he became the head coach at UMass. So it's okay, well, that's you got a job. I don't think they have a coordinator yet, but Like this is, I think Schiano creates opportunities for guys too. So, and I like this is success. Schiano's a defensive-minded head coach, but like this is success for a Rutgers coordinator to get a head coaching job at UMass, right? And if Schiano's going to take his time a little bit to find the next guy, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think that the scheme is Schiano's scheme, right? So
yep,
just find a guy that fits in there, and I think they'll be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Break. Come back. Run through the OC stuff, and we're in a different point in the North, offensively than defensively. These are not guys getting promoted. These are guys filling in for guys who were fired. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Back on KOTN, you want to talk offensive coordinators, Landis?
Let's do it.
Jason Beck at Utah. This is an old one. Andy Ludwig was fired in the middle of last year. They patched it together, and then they brought in Jason Beck. Again, this is just we're going over it to have a complete conversation here, but it just I would just like to reinforce: Northern defensive coordinators get hired away. Northern offensive coordinators get fired. I'm kind of blown away by the disparity here, Landis. I guess I'll have to get over it.
Is it because now I want to go through all of our teams. Do we have more defensive-oriented head coaches who that when they need to make a change for change's sake will axe the offensive coordinator?
I mean, I have everybody. Like, this feels like another show. That's good detective work. Let's raise the question on this show and answer it later. You think this has a chance to hit though, right? Plus, he brought his quarterback.
Yeah, he brought Devin Dampier with him. I thought it was a great hire. It's a new path for Utah's offense that I think, and I actually like Andy Ludwig. Just maybe sometimes things run their course a little bit.
Notre Dame tried to hire him like 2 years ago, and Utah wouldn't let him go, and Notre Dame wouldn't pay the buyout.
So this is a new direction, but I think a good one for Utah.
My wife in college, they had to do a magazine project, and you had to name the magazine, and they named their magazine New Directions, and then didn't sort of realize what was going on until they got up in front of the class and had to give their presentation and say New Directions fast. And run the words together repeatedly over and over again. I don't know if they were marked down, but it is not a thing to name a magazine.
That's like a SNL skit.
Yeah. Our Blossom episode. Blossom creates a kids magazine called New Directions, and hijinks ensue. Wisconsin. Phil Longo let go during the year. Jeff Grimes hired from Kansas. You weren't in love with it. I thought it was in the Tim Lester realm of hires, the way Iowa brought in him at offensive coordinator last year, which is you're not shooting for the stars, but you're trying to settle something down. So Iowa was trying to settle it down post Brian Ferentz, but Wisconsin's trying to settle it down post shooting for the stars with Phil Longo that didn't work.
Yeah, it's like what do you call it? Like sensible shoes, maybe. I guess this makes sense. Like I like a platform shoe that has a goldfish in the heel. You can go that way too, but maybe Jeff Grimes is what Wisconsin needs. So it's especially if they want to get back a little bit more to the identity of running the ball, which they got away from. So and that way it makes sense.
My sister's best friend's parents opened a shoe store when we were kids. And they named it the family name, Sensible Shoes, but they spelled sensible CENTS.
Yeah.
That's good. Do you think that's good? Is that how you would do it?
Yeah.
If you opened a Sensible shoe store? Yeah. Dana Holgorsen at Nebraska. Again, this is not new. Marcus Satterfield demoted during the year. Dana Holgorsen came in to start helping out. And of course, they kept him full-time as the OC. It's fascinating. These are like good, historically good football programs. We got more that are all just like, help our offense. Is Dana Holgorsen going to help Nebraska's offense? I mean, are Utah, Wisconsin, Nebraska not like all in the same spot here? These are like successful, like Kyle Whittingham, Luke Fickell, and Matt Rule have all had incredible success as head coaches in their career. These are winners, and they all are in dear God, please come save our offense mode, which is fascinating.
It is interesting. The only one of those three that like took a swing, I think, is Utah. Which is maybe why I like that one so much. Like this, like, you know, Dana Holgorsen, I think can scheme it up. I think with a quarterback like Dylan Raiola, it probably makes sense to like lean into let's really kind of air it out territory. So it's better than what Nebraska had. Is it the best they could have done? I don't know, but it's better than what they had.
Michigan, similar, but also Michigan's a year away from the national championship. Like we get it. I think we completely understood almost everything that happened with Michigan this year. Like, how could you let this happen? It's like, well, they let it happen like this. Because they had NCAA stuff and incredible turnover in so many ways, and they didn't put their best foot forward offensively this year as a result. But they're rectifying it. They are rectifying it, and they were rectifying it. But the day after the season, Sherrod Moore hired Kirk Campbell. I thought it was a good, decisive move for a head coach to do that. They brought in Chip Lindsey from North Carolina. I don't know. It's not the first time we've talked about this. I don't know. But like, does Lindsey fall into the Grimes Holgorsen kind of sensible shoes kind of higher as opposed to really taking a swing?
I think so. Like raise the floor a little bit. We were just wrong on Kirk Campbell. Like, it just was. Yeah. I mean,
sometimes you're wrong.
It's the worry that you were, you know, giving voice to not that long ago. We were talking about just giving a guy a job he's not ready for, and that's what Michigan did. And this is at least not the splashiest name, but an experienced guy who should give you a higher floor than you had last year.
Kansas promoted Jim Zebrowski from within when Grimes left. This is what I talked about before with Lance Leipold. I just think Leipold knows how to do this.
Yeah, and he's also an offensive guy too. So I think he'll probably almost always promote from within when it comes to offense.
Yeah. So this is, I mean,
do you know where Jim Zebrowski went to college? You'll be shocked.
Is it a tiny school in Pennsylvania?
Nope. He's I believe this is the first ever instance of a former Mount Union player becoming a coach.
Mount Union. Oh, congratulations to Mount Union. Oh, good luck to them. That's a big deal. I'm sure they'll build a statue to him outside. Actually, Mount Union has 1 million guys who are coaches. I just think it's smart and strategic, and it's such a different way. I've always been fascinated by this. Recruiting has changed so much. You're just dealing with NIL stuff now, but I always like doing it at a mid-tier level is so much more difficult than a high-tier level. That at the top, you're just like, okay, let's get the best players to come here. And in the middle, you're like, oh man, we want to recruit this guy, but I hope he doesn't have too good of a senior year of high school so that our find gets stolen away by a higher profile program. Right. And I think there's some of this too here that I think, again, I am wary of internal hires at the top of the sport. I am fully behind smart, strategic, developmental head coaches promoting from within at this level of the sport. And Kansas has been awesome. This is not like, but it's just, this is what Kansas, this is how Lance Leipold succeeds. This is how a guy like Lance Leipold maintains. You have to do this. You cannot be flailing around every time somebody goes to make more money for like, I guess we'll, so to have a pipeline in your building, what has happened this offseason for Kansas just reinforces, I think, how good Lance Leipold is. But if the exact same thing was happening at Notre Dame or Ohio State, I'd be like, I don't know if they should be doing that. Is that okay to think that way?
I think it's okay to think that way. Now, if Kansas hadn't finished the season the way it did, I maybe would feel a little differently about that, right? Like if it was really getting away from them and they got it back, they didn't quite finish it the way they did, but it wasn't like they finished 2-10, right? If they had, it's like, oh, maybe you do need a fresh infusion of ideas here. But I don't know that that's exactly where Kansas is.
And then the last one is, again, I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but the reports from Maryland are that Josh Gaddis will not be back on the staff, right? According to sources. Like, well, who do you think the sources are? It's people making the decisions.
Right.
Mike Locksley, the head coach, took the play calling away in the middle of last year. So when you get your play calling duties taken away, like of course you're not going to be back. But I don't think they've hired anybody yet. So I don't know what this means for Maryland. Mike Locksley interviewed for the Jets job. I didn't get it, but like I thought Maryland was going to have a tough year last year. I am like super interested to see where Maryland goes from here. Because, and this is a part of it, and whether Locksley keeps the play calling or hires somebody else to come in and do it. Like this is, I think sometimes Mike Locksley is overly criticized. Like, I mean, I think what he's done, like making Maryland a consistent bowl team, is actually pretty good. But this is the offseason that determines whether the Locksley era is going to run its course, and we're going to be talking about a new staff at Maryland in a year, or whether it's like the reset of like, here we go. It's this, it's the new era of the Locksley tenure. So I'm super interested to see who winds up being in charge of the offense.
I was really hoping it was going to be Brian Ferentz, because we would have gotten a week's worth of shows out of that. Brian Ferentz was I think a quality control or something in the background at Maryland. If you watched a Maryland game, you'd see Brian Ferentz just kind of hanging out in the background, like that. It's like, where's Waldo? But he went to Fresno State, so he's not going to be. The
what's he going to be at Fresno State? Is he going to be the O-line coach?
Tight ends coach.
Tight ends coach. Okay.
Which I think maybe he was even before he was an offensive line coach. I don't know. Could be a good spot for him. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to talk about Brian Ferentz, Maryland OC. It feels to me like they'll just put somebody in that role who's OC and title only, but Mike Locksley is going to call the plays as he tries to salvage his job.
That is hard, right? Again, you usually give up play calling from confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes it's from like, you have to do it, right? But sometimes if you feel like your job's on the line, you want to go down with the thing that got you there in the first place, where actually I think it can be advisable of like, this is, my friend told me this one time. I don't know if this is true. So I golf like once every 5 years. Uh-huh. But my friend who golfs says that like when they check the grip of like pro golfers, like as they go through their swing, like it's whatever, it's nice and light. Like it's not, they don't grip it too hard. Yeah. But amateurs in their swing are like gripping the club like their life depends on it, and they're gonna break the thing in half, because like when you don't know what you're doing, you hold on tighter. And sometimes I understand that instinct from head coaches, but sometimes really, if you want to be elite, you've got to loosen your grip, man. So I don't know. I mean, I think like and it's just different. And we are going to check in the North who's offensive minded, who's defensive minded as head coaches. Pat Narduzzi brought in a young OC last year, right? David Braun at Northwestern brought in a young OC. But that's opposite side of the ball. Locksley's an offensive guy, so like that's harder to do. But I'm not so sure I still wouldn't do that and teach him and lead him, but kind of let him do it so that you can run the program and take your best swing that way, not by gripping the club tighter and calling the plays yourself.
What if you grip the club tighter, but then you do a Happy Gilmore swing? Which is like you're holding on for dear life, but you're going to have some fun while you're doing it.
Oh, no, I'm okay. Yeah, you want to run trick plays like every third play?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's right. Also, I would advise gripping your sword tightly. This is not something like, I got a nice light grip on my sword. No.
I wonder what the preferred method was there. Like what's the technique on sword wielding? Do you want to, because you got to have some dexterity, right? Like you can't, and you got to be able to like switch hands and like maybe go underhand sometimes. I bet you don't want to super tight grip on a sword.
Can you imagine? I think in the 1200s, every single podcast was a sword wielding podcast. What else was there to talk about?
Yeah. You talk about whether or not you interlink your fingers like that when you hold the sword.
Yeah. That's what. Oh, ironically, you could have had a podcast about sword wielding in the 1200s called Kings of the North, because did you see the thing? I asked AI what Kings of the North was on the Google machine, and it said it's Kings of the North is either like a reference to Game of Thrones, the Bible, or a college football podcast. And I was like, those are the big three.
That's right.
Those are the big three. All right. We went long, but it's just so good to be back with our folks. Isn't it good to be back with our folks?
I'm so happy to be back.
We are so happy to be back. Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making Kings of the North part of your life. Thanks for allowing us to enjoy this 2024 college football season with you. I still think we need to recap a couple things, Landis. And I don't, people always want to talk about the future, but I don't think we have properly put the 2024 season to rest for all of our teams. So are you okay with doing that for a couple times?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I think we'll have a little bit of that coming. We have some awards we have to hand out. We actually have some good recapping to do, but I think like if you recap in service of the future, this is what you did, what does that tell us about what's next? It's not just the past for the sake of the past. That's what we want to do. But I think to understand and appreciate and celebrate and enjoy our Northern teams, we have to understand what they are and what they should be and how close they are to reaching their potential. Everybody has different potential, but I think the goal for everyone is reaching it. So I think that's part of like, I'm very interested in that, Landis, again, through this offseason. Like, what should you be? And I think in service of that, we have to make sure we understand what these teams were in 2024.
I agree. We've always set out to do that, but I don't think we've ever actually defined it. But this is the 2024 season. I think will be a good jumping off point for that. And as you mentioned, and which I totally forgot, we still have to crown a King of the North. We got to do postseason all North. We've talked about doing all transfer. We got all portal. We got a lot to do.
Yeah. We got some research coming your way, but we'll make it fun. As always, thanks to our producer, Mike Yerstowski, for making us look good and sound good. Most of all, thanks to you guys for being here. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. We're back. And that was Kings of the North.